Full disclosure, I brainstormed this adventure well before creating it. So what you're seeing here is the result of that. So let's get started. Let's start a 5-room dungeon. I decided to call this adventure the Sanguine Chapel, and that title came at the very end of creation in reality, or at least the very end of brainstorming, after I had an idea of what I wanted this to be about. So we start with the entry, like any good dungeon. The first thing that I do here is tackle one of my major hurdles personally when starting a new adventure, and that's what do you say at the start? And so I'm jotting a few notes down to myself about what the characters are going to see when they first encounter the Sanguine Temple. So we have weather exposed stone edifice, a door flanked by two cowled monk statues, and then we have, we'll see here, a carved door that has similar monks, but they're fanged and they're grinning. I like entries to involve a little bit of interaction. I think every level of a dungeon should involve some interaction with the characters. And since I'm writing this as kind of a sandboxy sort of adventure that can be kind of dropped in anywhere, I decided there should be a message around the door. It's a clue to a later puzzle. And I had it written in 3 languages, ideally not common when I run it, something else the players might know or the characters might know. And it translates to humor is the key. And that's going to be a little bit of a mislead, although helpful to the puzzle coming up if they can interpret the correct use of that. And sorry about the camera jiggle there. I want to make sure everything's in focus. So the puzzle is going to start with inside a stone antechamber behind the first door with a high ceiling. And I want it to be kind of a run-down, grimy kind of place. So there's bats and rats scurrying around. And they'll actually come back later in a minute here, but the puzzle starts with a scowling, fanged statue, very similar to the ones outside, but this one's in the center of the room and it has bold hands. The idea is I want it to be kind of humanoid-sized, maybe almost convince the party that it's a petrified vampire or something along those lines. There's a DC 15 check to catch the rats and bats that are in this room, which may be useful in solving this puzzle. We'll talk about that in a second here. But I wanted to put an attempt cap on that. 3 attempts max. So the door to the next room, though, is going to be sealed. And that seal can only be broken by feeding blood to this vampire-esque statue. Now, whatever blood that the players can get a hold of is fine. And that's the meaning of humor here, right? So it's not humor, haha, as in comedy. It's blood as in a bodily humor. Hence the mislead there. Now, the characters can feed any kind of blood to the statue. It can be blood from the bats or the rats. But humanoid blood will actually disarm the setback that is the trap that we're going to see here in the next section. Now, if humanoid donates blood to this trap, the donor is going to receive 1 level of exhaustion to replicate the idea of a serious blood loss. If the door is opened without disarming it, i.e. our setback here, what's going to happen is a stinking cloud trap will trigger. So it'll fill both this room, the antechamber, and the room beyond the door, the chapel itself, with this noxious, stinking cloud. DC 13 is what I set this at here to give it kind of a middle-of-the-road difficulty. This trap will also awaken the BBEG encounter, which in this case isn't really a singular big bad evil guy, but we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, so there's a DC 20 I set here to spot the runes. And those are the runes that sort of, the scripture for the trap, right? Like the magic runes that encode this stinking cloud spell to it. DC 15 to deface them accurately. And then if somebody fails by 5 or more, it also triggers the trap. But disarming in this way only disarms the trap on one side. The only way to disarm it on both sides is to feed the statue humanoid blood. So in any case, the door opens and we have our BBEG encounter. In this case, I like the idea of undead guardians. So I wanted to give them immunity to poison, which means that they're not going to be affected by the stinking cloud. And then I misspelled blind sight, but they also have blind sight for 30 feet to allow them to get around the heavy obscurement the cloud will cause. Now, since this is kind of a sandboxy adventure, it's meant to be kind of dropped in somewhere else in an adventure or in a campaign. I wanted to make it easily scalable. So I create a chart instead of picking one bad guy, where I mark out the party levels 1 through 4 for a tier 1 kind of encounter, and I note down the challenge rating and the kind of creatures that it might trigger, as well as the number of them to achieve the appropriate deadly difficulty that I was going for. I do the same kind of deal for the reward here. That way, if they come across this at level 4, they're not getting level 1 kind of rewards. And so I like to set a little bit of gold that's associated with this, as well as a few magic items. Makes it kind of worthwhile for the players to sidetrack from their main quest and dive into something quick like this. I like to put this kind of stuff on random encounter tables when I'm doing sandbox adventures, and that just gives them a greater sense of exploring this world and kind of uncovering things as they go. And so I make their sort of 2 tiers of this. Levels 1 and 2 are going to get the same rewards, in this case, a spell scroll, medium mithril armor, an alchemy jug, and 3 and 4 are going to get a 2nd level spell scroll, heavy mithril armor, and an alchemy jug as well. And then once that's put in, really what's left is to just kind of go ahead and sketch out the map of this place. I like to use the little circle and star for statues. I use really simple kind of design elements for myself here, just to kind of cue myself in on what's here. This isn't designed to be a battle map for my players. In fact, most of this kind of thing I would run in Theater of the Mind, although you really could kind of draw this battle map up pretty quick, scan it, and toss it into like a virtual tabletop if you wanted to do that. Or draw it out on your battle map on the actual real table. That's where you play. So we have an exterior. We've got 2 chambers at any chamber, and then we've got the chapel itself. Any chapel needs a good little walk up to the dais and the asp. Just kind of counting out places for our columns here, which are those little squares with the X's in them. Kind of run down the nave here. And then, we of course need the vampire sarcophagus at the end. Now you notice there's no vampire in this. So I didn't note this to myself, but I, just kind of assumed the vampire has been destroyed, or, is no longer exists in that sarcophagus. It's been kind of long abandoned. But we kind of cue up the expectation of a vampire through this adventure, making it maybe kind of a clincher for the characters as they run through. The last thing I do is just kind of number all the spaces so I know where everything is, and that's all there is to it. If you want to see more of the Sanguine Chapel, I've actually cleaned up this adventure and published it in the DM's Guild. You can download that from the link in the video description. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you never miss a video.